All right, welcome everybody to another webinar by DeKalb County Unites. I wanted to introduce myself. I'm Colin Barnes with Sundog IT, small business owner here in DeKalb County. And I also have Courtney Strohacker here with me. She's with the DeKalb County Convention and Visitors Bureau, and she'll be assisting me with the Q&A during this presentation. Just so you all know, a little housekeeping. If you want to ask a question of our panelists, just move your mouse down to the bottom of your screen and you're going to see an icon that says Q&A. Just go ahead and click on that, type in your question, and we'll make sure that we get your question answered during the course of this webinar. And if we don't, we'll make sure that we get it to you afterwards. So today, real quick, DeKalb County Unites, what is it? A grassroots movement here in DeKalb County. A bunch of people came together right when the COVID-19 crisis started to hit. We realized that there was going to be a pretty significant impact on our small business community. So members of Northern Illinois University, the private sector, the nonprofit sector, the government sector, all came together to figure out what can we do to make a positive economic impact on the small business community here in DeKalb County. So we came together, we came up with a few initiatives, one of them being our website, which is DeKalbCountyUnites.com, a wealth of great information on there of all the different programs available on the federal level and on the state level, including not just stimulus money and financial assistance, but also unemployment information for your staff and for yourself, for the sole proprietors out there. We also have all of our webinars recorded and posted there, so you can go ahead, click on webinars at the top of DeKalbCountyUnites.com, and you can see all of our previous webinars. And there's a lot of great ones, especially our small business spotlight that we do on Friday. It has a lot of wonderful ideas from other small businesses and how they have adapted during these crazy times in order to stay relevant with their clients and also bring in some additional revenue, which is always a good thing. Second thing that we did is we went out and called all the major corporations in our community, and I should say all our major organizations, the large employers, and asked them to see if there was ways that they could redirect their revenue to the local economy here. Rather than spending something on Amazon, maybe that's something that they could buy locally, but then also to accelerate their spending if possible. A lot of them have budgets, so we wanted to make sure that they had the opportunity. They're going to spend it anyway. Let's see if we can spend it now and put those dollars in the local economy immediately. Had over 50 organizations take advantage of that, which was fantastic. Warmed my heart to see the support that was out there. And the third thing we did is this webinar series. So every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 2 p.m., like clockwork, we're on here with industry experts, financial and banking experts, and then also our small business spotlight on Friday, where again, we just highlight some great things going on in our small business community. So today is our regular trifecta that we have. We have Jock Sommese with the Small Business Development Center out of Waubonsee. Jock is an amazing resource for the small business community to be able to engage with well beyond what's going on with the COVID-19 crisis. It's also about business planning, sales, anything you could think of around a business or in running a business. Jock is the go-to guy. So Dr. Jock Sommese, thanks for coming on today. We also have Mark Kerman with Siepert and Company, a local CPA firm here in town. And then we have Frank Roberts from First National Bank of Omaha. So gentlemen, I just wanted to welcome you today, and boy, let's get in it, okay? Jock, I didn't know if you wanted to cover, you said there was a new grant, new loan out there?
Yeah, I just received this. It's an EIDL, as we remember before. That was part of the disaster program originally. But now this one is specifically for ag businesses. Again, less than 500 employees. It's the same URL as before. And I had asked Courtney to take a look. Do you see any information on there, Courtney, that might be helpful?
I did not find it on the one that you gave me, but I'm still kind of looking through there.
Not a problem. If you have ag friends, and that's livestock included, please tell them about this because the money is available. It is a loan program. I would think it's going to follow the same parameters that the original EIDL had mentioned. The website is www.sba.gov/disaster. And you can find the ag business EIDL. So, you know, that's some good news because I was actually talking to my neighbor who is a farmer, and he said his worst year was 1998, and he's thinking that this year might be pretty close to it. So this might give some relief to all those people out there.
Awesome.
Jock, I'm looking at the website right now. What it looks to me like is they're actually limiting applications on the EIDL to only ag applicants at this point. Due to the limited funds, they've already expended the monies for any other types of business. They're now limiting the remaining funds only for ag businesses.
Okay, good to know. Thank you, Mark.
Yep.
So an easy way would be to Google EIDL and agriculture, potentially, Jock.
Ag business is what it's called. Yeah.
Yep. And what we'll do is I'll make a note. We'll post a link on our social media for everyone once we find, maybe Mark, what he has is perfect, so you can read through that and find out. And if it looks like there's a bunch of interest, we might do a webinar, at least a portion of one of our webinars coming up regarding that. Today, we're definitely going to talk about PPP. So many of us have already applied for the PPP loan. Many of us have received approval from the SBA, and many of us have also received the funds. But if I remember right, I do remember right that all the money ran out, and then there was another wave of funds contributed to the PPP program, and another round was opened up. And Jock, wasn't that April 27th that opened up? Something like that?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, so a quick note, we're not going to go into detail on how to apply for the PPP loan because you can view previous webinars on that. But the summary, really what it comes down to is they'll look at your last 4 quarters or your last 12 months, let's say, of payroll. A lot of times it's focused in 2019. Divide that by 12, the entire year's payroll, divide it by 12, and multiply that by 2.5 times. That's the amount that you can apply for a loan for PPP. Once you receive the money, once the money hits your bank account, for an 8-week period, the money used for payroll and rent and utilities, I'm generalizing here, but those 3 categories, has all the potential in the world to be forgiven. So if you haven't applied for PPP, another round of funding opened up. I would highly encourage you to do that. And if you go to DeKalbCountyUnites.com, you're going to see office hours for Brian Oster with OC Creates and myself, Cohen Barnes with Sundog IT. We're there to answer any questions that you might have or help you with the process, even if it's scanning documents. We'll do everything we can to make sure that we can get that stimulus money in your hands to help your business and help your employees. So that's the PPP program. So did I miss anything there, Jock?
You're good.
Okay. So there's been a lot's transpired over the last 7 days. I've been getting a ton of calls, what it comes down to, a new ruling by the SBA. And I'll kind of summarize it, but Jock, clarify, or Frank or Mark or whoever. But ultimately what happened was everybody and their brother applied for this money, the PPP program. And since everyone just had to self-swear that I cross my heart, I'm being impacted by COVID-19, you were basically automatically approved and you would get the money. And in the process of doing that, we had publicly traded companies. We had companies sitting on millions and millions, if not tens, if not hundreds of millions of dollars of cash. And they all applied and they all got it. And that was not what the spirit or the intent of the stimulus money was. The intent of it was to inject those funds into businesses that were impacted by the COVID-19 crisis that potentially would lay off employees to the point of even closing their doors and getting them an influx of or an infusion of cash in order to keep their businesses afloat, but also keep those people employed. So there's a lot of bad publicity out there, is my understanding, and that bad publicity caused a lot of organizations to return their money. But Jock, and I'm happy to review some of it, Jock, but I didn't know if you wanted to give a summary or a Mark or Frank on the new ruling with the SBA on the forgiveness piece when it comes to if you swear you were impacted by the COVID-19 crisis.
I mean, my feeling is that the language that was used initially on page 2 of the application has not changed. But now we have a backlash of companies getting money that should not have. And that's why now we're seeing some things coming out saying, oh, we didn't mean that, we mean that, we meant this instead.
Yeah, because ultimately it says borrowers must make this certification in good faith, taking into account their current business activity and their ability to access other sources of liquidity sufficient to support their ongoing operations in a manner that is not significantly detrimental to the business. A lot of interpretation in that one, but what has scared a lot of people, I think, or caused a lot of anxiety to go up is the ruling that there's an amnesty period right now. So if you applied for PPP money and you really weren't impacted and that's subjective, what impacted means, it seems like, there's an amnesty period that if you return all the money by May 7th, you're good. But I think the angst that a lot of people have, and I'll speak to the panelists on this, anyone want to give some their insight in it. The angst people have is, what does that mean? What if I'm not sure I was completely impacted, or I don't know what the level of impact was and I keep the money? Are they going to come after me, or are they going to come after me with lots of penalties and fines? So I'll put it to the panelists on your thoughts or anything you've heard about this May 7th deadline, and if you go past it and it's deemed that you weren't significantly impacted, what do you think that means? I can start with Mark.
All right. So yeah, Colin, again, a little history on this. This was all actually being discussed as they were working through the passing of the second group of funding for the PPP loans. So this was all part of those discussions. And remember, everything goes so fast. It's funny to think that, okay, this is what, a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago that this all happened. But what we're really talking about here is news started coming out that we had organizations, again, that were publicly traded that were receiving these funds. And there was a public outcry that, well, shucks, they really should have had access to other funding to be able to keep their operations going. They have access to markets that small businesses don't have access to. Okay, so that's the history that we have to look at this with perspective. So keep that in mind. As they're passing this legislation, they're saying, okay, we have businesses that are receiving funding that did have access to other markets. And if they had access to other markets, they didn't believe that they should qualify for being able to get the PPP funding. So now we pass legislation and they come out with some stronger language that basically says, if you received funding and you had access to other funds that, through markets that were not available to other people, you then have an amnesty period through May 7th in order to be able to get to pay that money back without any repercussions. And I believe that's really the perspective and the concept that they're putting that verbiage out there to address. Not to say that they're not going to look at other people that received funds. Not to say that you're free and clear, but to kind of set everyone's mind at ease. That was the intention. That was the purpose of that verbiage that was put out there when it was put out. And again, this didn't just come out within the past 7 days. This came out when the funding was going through in that second batch of funding that Congress ultimately debated and ultimately did pass. So I guess that would be my perspective. The first thing I'd want to throw out there, so everyone has a better feel for what we're talking about.
Frank, any thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I generally concur with what Mark's talking about. I go back and we were talking about this earlier. Round one, it came fast, it came furious, and I've talked earlier quite a bit about context, about what was being asked to be done. And when you're asked to do that amount in a very short period of time with a lot of money, inevitably there's going to be issues that percolate. And there's two issues from my perspective. One is there were some people that got it that I don't believe it was intended for. Again, these are my personal opinions, not of the company I work for. And the Los Angeles Lakers got a PPP loan for $4.6 million. I really don't think that the spirit of the legislation was to support the Los Angeles Lakers and their payroll, although I may be wrong. I don't believe it was. But when you look at the law and you look at what was written, they use words like borrowers must certify in good faith that the loan request is necessary to support ongoing operations. And they talk about liquidity sufficient to promote ongoing operations. Well, what do those mean? I mean, what's necessary mean? What's ongoing mean? And I think what they're really asking for, and again, this is just my personal opinion, that, you know, if you have a company, if your company does $1 million a year in revenue and you have a $30 million deposit at your bank, that'd be pretty tough to say, you know what, I need this loan. But if you're looking, saying, hey, I got enough to get, you know, through the next several weeks, and ongoing for me is now, but if I get the PPP money, I may be able to delay this and recover better. So, and you know, it's open to interpretation. They kind of capped it, as I've said last week, and I think, Cohen, you've talked about it, that the Federal Reserve will be looking at. My understanding is every PPP loan greater than $2 million, the Federal Reserve will get in and look at that. And that's a pretty high bar. So, like I said, the word in here to me that makes the most sense is in good faith. You're the one that knows your business. You're the one that knows your nonprofit. You're the one that's going to have to make that determination. But inevitably, look at the facts, go with your gut feel, and make a determination. And if you just feel like, hey, I really don't need this money, I looked at it more as, you know, maybe free money, then maybe it would be appropriate to turn it back. But, you know, I know it's a big question out there, but I think you just, as I like to say, you get a cup of coffee, you get a white sheet of paper, you kind of go through how you got to here, rethink it. And if you say, yeah, it's necessary, then live with it.
You know, if I could just chime in, I think the last stat I saw is over 2 million was anywhere between 7 and 10% of the total dollars went to those kind of categories. So again, that's not the majority of the people we're talking about. You know, Mark, you talked about public companies, and my knee-jerk reaction was, that's right, they shouldn't get it because they could do an offering. But if the company's not making money, could they really do an offering? And if, let's just say they were a drug company trying to do something for COVID-19 and they needed the funds to keep the scientists going, should that be eligible? You know, there's just so much gray area here that God only knows what's going to happen. But as I always say, there are so many people in that category that have taken it for the right reasons or need it for the right reasons. You know, they're not going to close every business down that has said, oh, I shouldn't have taken the money, although I have $20,000 that you've given me. So I don't think it's going to be that drastic. But again, I'm kind of optimistic about most things.
Yeah, and like we always say on this, I mean, this is really, everyone's just giving their personal opinions based off of what they've read, the knowledge that they've had for decades in their various industries. So we're just sharing perspective, not anything you need to go home and treat as law, essentially. So kind of wrap up part of this. Mark, you always talk about if it passes the sniff test. With that $2 million mark, the spirit of this thing was to, out of the $2.2 trillion stimulus package, there is about 550 billion that was given towards the Paycheck Protection Program. And the spirit of it was to go to Main Street, to keep businesses like Siepert and Sundog operational, so we don't go under, and to make sure that we maintain our staffing levels. Basically, to keep the small business sector alive and making it through and keeping a bunch of people from going to unemployment. To me, that's how I always interpreted this. And now when you hear about Ruth's Chris Steakhouse and all the others and the NBA teams getting money and all that, that $2 million mark is really just kind of like a line in the sand to say, look, we know everyone above this mark, you're a large organization and we need to take a closer look at what you've got going on. So chances are, when the smoke all clears and it's all done, there'll be some audits that'll happen just like with taxes. But my feeling is that they're going to be going after the larger ones when it really comes down to that. Would that be the personal take from all three of you? I know.
I would say absolutely. You know, and then if you think about it, let's just take the Lakers as an example. Have the Lakers been affected? Well, they still have to pay the salaries, right? they're not getting the revenue. Should they be eligible? I don't know. I mean, and they're going to be the 2 million, the organizations that have received $2 million or more are going to fight this thing in court where I don't think anything's ever going to be done to them that they have to repay it. So who knows? But I'm saying Main Street people really should not be a major concern.
So any comments, Mark?
I guess, you know, you're talking to an accountant, and I deal with audits all the time. So from my perspective, the way I'm interpreting it and what I'm reading is, all right, anybody over the 2 million is going to be audited. He's basically indicating 100% of those businesses that receive that funding will be audited. Beyond that, he's alluded to the fact that he wants to audit other organizations that are receiving this funding. I would look at it from the perspective of you probably have a similar audit ratio that you would from the IRS at that point. So from there, you still want to make sure you cross your T's, you dot your I's, you document, and I think we've kind of banged the drum on that a bit in past webinars, that you want to make sure you're constantly documenting what it is that you're doing with the funds. But in this case, maybe just document the reasoning. If they come back and audit you 2 years from now, are you going to have all of that information at, back in the back of your mind where, oh yeah, that's right. Exactly. I'm seeing Jock shake his head no. And that's kind of my thought process as well. You might as well now document what it is, the reasoning you had, and even put some numbers to paper to demonstrate this was our projection. This is what we were thinking when we applied for this loan, and it was reasonable. So yeah, so there can be, I would say there can and likely will be a group of other businesses that'll be audited, and it'll likely be random. That would be my perspective, just like an IRS audit.
Yep. We have a question. All right, Frank, do you have any comments on that before I ask a question?
No, other than a couple of things. One, I agree with Mark. In my world, when somebody wants to borrow money, so let's look at the future operating performance. What are you projecting? What are your assumptions? And what's your rationale to drive those assumptions? It's pretty simple. I think if you, consider the same type of approach, what's my business look like? What are my assumptions? And what's the rationale for the assumptions? It might not be a bad way to look. The other thing too is this get a lot of talk, but when they started talking about round 2, and round 1 was what it is, and they identified some issues which we knew were going to be there. Politically, they were not just going to say, well, we're not going to change anything. Here's another $310 billion. So, how much teeth is in this? I have no idea. I have no idea. But the one thing I will say before we go further, there is a report out on the SBA website, and memory serves me correct. I think round 2 is $310 billion. Through May 1st, they had approved $175 billion. So over the weekend and going forward, there's still $135 billion of money left as of May 2nd. And you can see this out on the SBA website. So there's still time, I guess, is something that's important to note.
Yep.
Still time to apply.
Hey Mark, a kind of a follow-up with what you're saying on the documentation piece. So let's say it's a year from now, you're getting audited, and you're right. You're going to want to have that narrative of the why documented, because it's going to leak out our ears. A lot's going to happen in the next 12 or 24 months or whenever you're going to be audited. 2 things on that. I think the documentation piece would be really good to help with the justification of why you applied and received the money and utilized the money for PPP. And that justification may save you from penalties and fines. Wouldn't you think they could still say that you didn't qualify, so you need to pay the money back or a portion of the money back? But maybe at that point, it's just the 1% on the loan, essentially, as opposed to penalties and interest. So the documentation may not let you keep all the money that was forgiven, but the documentation could go a long way with the assessment of fines if they deem that you should pay some of it back. Would that be accurate, or is that crazy?
I guess we're in uncharted waters here. So my answer is I would say that's possible.
Yeah. So definitely everyone, while it's fresh in our minds, let's document the heck out of this.
And remember one thing, we were talking about a portion of it in forgiveness. So this was never a slam dunk that you weren't going to have to pay anything back.
Yeah.
And I think people went into this with the idea of, oh, it's free money, I don't need to do anything. And that's just not the case.
Yeah, but that's a whole another can of worms, and I'm gonna ask that question here in a second. But first, Steve asked us, has there been a limit on when they can audit a loan recipient? Yeah. So how far out can the IRS? How many years out? Oh, go ahead, Frank.
No, I've not heard any guidance or guidelines around that question.
So they'll probably utilize some existing guideline that the federal government already has. And I would probably look to the IRS. That's just the way my mind thinks when it comes to audits and money and federal money. Mark, what's the guidelines on the IRS? Like how long out can they, in general, audit you?
As a general rule, they have a look back period of 3 years.
Yeah.
As a general rule.
But Mark, if there's fraud involved, then what?
If there's fraud involved, there's no, it can go as far back as as the beginning of time.
Right.
All right, yeah. we're trying to lower anxiety here. Right? Oh my gosh. All right, Adam is asking a question, and I hope I'm getting the spirit of this, Adam. So he received money from the SBA's EIDL program. Or first he's asking, has anyone else received money? And the answer to that is yes, Adam, in two levels. People have received the $10,000 that just supposed to be the 72 hours, quick influx of cash into your business, right in your bank account, totally forgiven piece. A bunch of people have received that. I know of others, and Jock, I think you know of others too, that have actually received or have been approved for the larger amounts that they requested for under the EIDL program. So we know that has actually happened up there.
And Cohen, I know more people that have been accepted, but less people that have gotten the cash right now.
Yeah, right. They've at least, the SBA said you're approved.
You're approved, right.
Yeah, someday we'll get around to actually getting you the money you asked for.
And Frank could probably answer that better than Mark or I could, I would think.
I don't know, because that's not through lenders. Frank, do you know anyone that's received the SBA's EIDL money?
Only anecdotally.
Yeah, okay. Mark? Yeah, no. To continue with Adam's question, he said he applied for the PPP loan, received the PPP loan money on April 21st, and then last week on Thursday, he had a deposit in his bank account for the amount requested. Boom, so he's got his money. Awesome. He's saying you're receiving. Oh, so I think his question is, when is he going to find out about the EIDL loan amount? And I think we just answered that. We don't know when the SBA is going to actually issue the loan dollars for the larger EIDL loan amount. Correct, Jock?
Yeah, they'll get a notification of how much it will be, and they also give you the option of lowering it if you decide to, when you do get the notification.
Okay. And Adam, if you want to break your question down into smaller bite-sized chunks, I'd be happy to ask more of them. Okay, so let's play this forward a little bit. Here I am, Sundog. I received some PPP money. Have I lost revenue in my business because of COVID-19? Yes, right. Have I, as a business person, if you lose revenue, we all want to achieve a certain gross margin and we all want to achieve a certain profit, right? So in normal circumstances, if you in a business lose revenue, generalizations here, you would adjust by cutting expenses somehow in order to keep your gross margin. And as a service-based industry, payroll is the biggest expense, right? So in theory, if you lose revenue, you would lay people off. So here comes the PPP money. COVID-19 hits. Many of us have had our revenue impacted by our business, but the spirit of the thing is to keep people employed. So I receive the PPP money. I keep all my people employed at their same rate, no furloughs, no nothing. And I go through my 8 weeks. How do I start getting an idea of the forgiveness piece? What do we have any idea of what that calculation is? I'm trying to think, is it the amount of revenue I lost? Is it the cost of the people I would have laid off? Is it just the full 8 weeks of that payroll, 75% being, at least 75% being payroll and the remainder being utilities? Does anyone have any insight on that particular question?
Well, all right, let me
Yeah.
clarify what you're asking, Colin. Because you added an element there of having lost revenues. And you're questioning, is it based on a calculation of the lost revenues? Is that what you're asking?
I'm asking, how do we think it's going to be calculated, the forgiveness piece?
All right, so we are awaiting further guidance. I will say that just from the get-go. But the concept here is strictly based on expenditures that you pay out. So concept is, you were loaned $100,000. I'm using that as a basic example. You were loaned $100,000. You had valid payroll costs of $75,000. So now you've met the 75% test. Okay. Let's say you had another $10,000 worth of valid rent, utilities, and other mortgage interest expense. So now we're up to $85,000 of valid expenditures that you incurred against that $100,000 loan. In theory, the first level, the first calculation would strictly be looking at making sure you met the 75% test, which you did, and then saying, okay, how much do you have in valid expenditures? In my example, you would have $85,000 in valid expenditures. If you had everybody at the same level as far as head count, because we have to keep track of head count as well. If in theory you had the same head count you did as when you were at February 15th, I believe is the date they look back to. Okay, if you had the same head count, theoretically you would have $85,000 in loan forgiveness. $15,000 would need to be paid back in the form of a loan. If you had less employees, so a lower head count would then serve to reduce your 85,000 is your starting point. Then it would serve to reduce the amount of loan that's forgiven. That's the theory behind how that calculation is supposed to work. Has nothing to do with your income, lost revenues, anything along those lines. It's strictly expenditures. It's strictly based on expenditures. And whether you had valid expenditures that qualified for the PPP loan forgiveness. Now, I will say that we're still awaiting further guidance. The AICPA, that's kind of that's our head for accountants. That's the organization that we all look to kind of direct be our leadership. We're clamoring to try to get some further guidance, and we haven't gotten it yet. So we are. In all honesty, we're navigating a little bit based on, sensing the wind and the direction and things, reading tea leaves and everything else. So we're trying to read into what it is that we've been given so far, but there is further guidance that will be coming, and the SBA has already indicated they will provide that.
Which, and if we continue that in the spirit of things, they have to decide on that guidance rapidly, because we've received the money, we're making decisions right now.
Exactly.
So if I can sum up what I think I heard, if I apply for PPP, got my money, if, let's say it's an audit, and if in that audit I have been determined that, you know what, you were adversely impacted, so that part's done, you are saying that if I would have, out of that $100,000, had my $75,000 in payroll, $10,000 in expenses, all valid, $85,000 was forgiven. When I'm audited, they would look at and just look and see and go, yep, you know what, you were hit by it, so you qualified, and yep, that $85,000 fits the formula that we established for the PPP as we understand it right now. So, and I'm asking that because some people are like, I've been affected, but maybe $25,000 of it is what I really needed, or whatever. The government's not going to look at that. It's just simply, as we understand it right now, you got 100, 75 payroll, 10 utilities, and you are legitimately impacted by COVID, you're good. Jock's nodding his head over there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because Mark nailed that one. But I'd also like to say the whole head count issue, you do not need to hire the same people back.
No.
That head count can be new people if that becomes the issue. Because you know me, I'm always looking at the workaround of all these things.
Yep. Frank, any comments on that? Because I got a direct question from you or for you after you're done.
No, go ahead.
So the forgiveness piece, all right? So when it comes time for that, at some point, I'll be reaching out to my financial institution and talking to my banker. Let's say I'm approaching that 8 weeks or I'm at the 8 weeks. The forgiveness piece, who's determining that? Like, does my lender have say in that? Or are you guys just transactional and that's it?
Well, I think the best way to look at this is, and I know this is frustrating to people, but these are great questions, and we just continue to wait for guidance. And I know that's not what people want to hear, but Cohen, you said earlier that we need to get this information. We need to get it really fast. I totally agree with you, but keep in mind the SBA and the Treasury did not come out with the final rules of this program until about 10 o'clock the night before it started. And I know it's a little different time frame because it was trying to be rushed, but I do know the SBA, the Treasury, and everybody's working hard to get these final rules. Here's what's embedded in what my understanding is that when the 8 weeks is up, you will go to your bank where you got the PPP money and make a request for forgiveness of the debt. How that actually gets processed, I don't know. But what I do know is the banks have 60 days from the date of your request, I believe. I don't know whether it's the 60 days from the end of the 8 week period or 60 days from your request, but whatever. The bank has to decision that within 60 days. And
Okay.
beyond that, that's the only thing about forgiveness that is reliable right now.
Awesome. So Adam just sent in a clarification on his question. Now, this is incredible, right? He says, I've never received anything that said I was approved, how much I would receive, or when I would receive it. They just deposited it in my bank account. And on Sunday, sent me an email that my economic injury disaster loan application is currently being processed in the order it was received. So Adam, I don't know of any guidance I can give you. I would definitely be reaching out to, actually, Jock Sommese here. Jock, I think you would want to talk to Adam about this just to find out more information about what transpired. Because Jock talks to so many businesses that the lessons he's learning from firsthand from people like us that are out there that have been getting the money benefits him greatly in his advice and consult with all the businesses that call him. So Jock, how can Adam get a hold of you?
I mean, if you go to DeKalb County Unites, my information is there on the front page. My email address is SBDC, as in Small Business Development Center, JMS@gmail.com. And my phone number is 267-275-6950. So SBDCJMS@gmail.com or 267-275-6950. And I'll be glad to talk to you.
And a point of clarification too, you can receive EIDL money. That's one loan. I think the interest rate's 3% or something. And you can receive PPP. They are separate loans entirely. The only crossover, and correct me if I'm wrong, three of you, the only crossover is that initial $10,000 from the EIDL loan that's forgiven, that will get deducted out of your PPP total that gets forgiven. Is that correct? Yep. Okay. Everyone's nodding their heads. So those of you that called in, there's a lot of head nodding going on right now. All right. Excellent. I got a question from Jennifer here. I'm just going to read it. I don't have time to look at it ahead of time. So here we go. If we were waiting on unemployment and decided to take the PPP loan due to the backlog and not receiving it, Does that mean I can still get the unemployment from March to the date I got the PPP loan? Jock, you got any insight on that?
I've been kicking that one around from the very beginning. I mean, how can you have 8 weeks and then it's from the date of origination? My answer is I have no idea. But I personally think that that 8 weeks will probably be extended. And I personally believe that that 75% is probably going to be reduced. But again, I have no factual information to back that up.
And Jennifer, we're most likely going to have someone from the IDES on our next Monday call, potentially, but we're definitely going to have someone from the Illinois Department of Employment Security on one of our future webinars coming up. We're just trying to lock in a date at this point. That'd be a great one to be able to attend to get the answer, because it's someone that works there. Because I know trying to call right now, we're hearing it's impossible. Email, it's impossible. So we'll actually have a representative get some of those answers for you all, which would be great. So also, I wanted to hit a couple of highlights on PPP, but she just made me lose my train of thought. How about any wrap-up comments or anything about the PPP? Because what we have to remember, a lot of people are just hearing some of this for the first time. They may have received it, but they haven't attended the other webinars. So is there any parting thoughts that we want to make sure that people are aware of ultimately before we wrap up today? Oh, you guys are just go, Jock.
I'll go.
I just think it's tough to make a decision when you don't have any guidelines.
Yeah.
Ultimately, have I mentioned that you should document? Also, have I mentioned that you should already be forecasting how much money you think you're going to have forgiven? I want you, if you've received those funds, my advice to you is to spend the time on the front end right now doing those calculations, projecting how much you think that you're going to have forgiven. I'm going to make a prediction that most of you out there will not have your full loan forgiven. That's my prediction right now. Work through the numbers, crunch those numbers, because you're going to find out that even though you would have expected that all of that's going to be forgiven, you've got plenty of expenditures. When you really work through those numbers and you take a look, you're going to say, oh, shoot, I don't have enough. And doing it on the front end, doing it early, gives you the ability to make moves so that you can maximize that loan forgiveness. So that's my advice to you.
Yeah, and the documentation piece we talked about in other webinars. You know what Cohen Barnes at Sundog's doing. The money went in a separate account. As I make payroll, I transfer it out of that account. I've got a one-to-one, so my bank statement will literally be a one-to-one transaction for all qualifying expenses for the PPP loan. Important point of clarification, those that are new, and there's a lot of new people on this webinar, the 8-week period starts from the day the cash hits your bank account, as we understand it right now. It starts from the day it hits the bank account and 8 weeks from there. So it's really important. Qualifying expenses are when the check was cut. So not when 2 months worth of bills you just climb. No, it's 8 weeks, and it's when the check was cut. So be very cognizant of your payroll expenses, which is probably your largest one. Those that pay twice a month like we do, that's not 4 paychecks then. That's 3 paychecks. So we have to figure out what that means for us. Maybe we pay early or something like that. But it's based off of cash, not accrual, or maybe that's a bad example in this. But ultimately, it's that 8-week period. Just remember, 8 weeks when the check was cut. Those qualifying expenses is what you want to keep track of. And then, as Mark said, the narrative, the why did you apply, is really important right now to document. Frank, did you have any before Jock? Frank, did you have any closing comments?
Yeah, just a couple. This is a very small thing, but it does matter. You referenced when the check is cut. Technically, it's when the proceeds are deposited into your checking account. There are no, to my understanding, there are no checks that are being written. It's when the proceeds are ACH'd into your checking account. Number 2 is, as of Friday, the availability is still $135 billion. So there's money to be had. Consistent with Mark and Jock, I think you need to just get a cup of coffee and think about, should I apply? And then think through your certification, because the safe harbor ends on May 7th. And then the other component as we continue to move forward, and this is just a summary of things we've talked about today, is we're all frustrated by the lack of guidelines today. You know, so you're keeping track of information, but what's really important to keep track of, how best to keep track of it, what am I going to be asked to do? The unfortunate part is there's not really any material guidelines that are out there. So I would encourage you to be patient, be very diligent in your record keeping, and as soon as that information comes out, we sort of pass it along to everybody.
Jock, you had something to say?
Yeah, I and Mark would probably chime in on this. You do not want to prepay people for future employment. You do not want to overpay people for their work. You just need to do the right things that you always do. And Mark, what were those two pieces of advice? I'm not quite sure you've said it enough times for us here. I would like to say that Courtney has a neat thing behind her. And Cohen, I was wondering what that was.
Courtney, you want to describe it?
I have to unmute myself. That's our guide to social distancing. So we've got, it's also on our website or on our Facebook page, but how DeKalb County measures 6 feet. So we have apples, bold spirits, whiskey glasses and wine, pumpkins, huskies, and a kayak. So everything that helps you experience DeKalb County. Thanks for noticing that, Jock. I appreciate that.
It's new, so that's why. And Cohen has his open for business behind him also.
Yeah, you should see those in many businesses throughout DeKalb County as well as the state of Illinois. It's just an initiative for small businesses to be able to put in their window. So we've got one brand essentially that means they're open. Doesn't mean you can walk in and do something. It means they're open. So pick up the phone, call them, go on their social media, go on their website. In some way or another, they are transacting business during this time. And all of us, whatever we can do to spend some money locally is absolutely fantastic. So thanks for pointing that out, Jock. All right, we're going to go ahead and wrap up today. Don't forget, every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, we've got a webinar. Our webinar is coming up. I'm looking this Wednesday is,
we have Lisa Gonzalez from the DeKalb County Health Department. Awesome. And she will be talking about getting your business prepared to reopen and your customers for reopening, what that's going to look like and what's going to be expected.
And that applies to all of us, not just restaurants, just any business out there. That's going to be a wealth of information. So I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, and if anyone has questions beforehand for Lisa, feel free to go to our website and go ahead and send those in. And then that way we can get them to her so she can have a little bit of an idea maybe what to prepare for. And then on the Friday, the 8th, we'll continue our Small Business Spotlight. We have Veronica Miranda from Studio 815 coming in, Carolyn Tobinson from Tobinson's Ace Hardware, and Vicki Overmiller from Kids Stuff. So 3 totally different small businesses that have been able to pivot and modify and stay successful and relevant during COVID.
Yep, so it'll be exciting. So just go to DeKalbCountyUnites.com, click on webinars at the top, and there'll be a link for you to go ahead and register for every one of our webinars. So that's it. I just wanted to thank everyone, thank our panelists for coming on today, especially this trifecta. I know you guys every week have been on here. Greatly appreciate your insight, and I know a lot of our attendees do too. Also on our website is frequently asked questions. So there's a lot of questions that have been asked that are already on there, so you can get your answers. But also don't forget, you can reach out to us directly on our website. Fill out any question you have. I don't care what it is, and we will find someone that'll be able to get the answer to you, especially you, Adam. Reach out to Jock, or if you need further guidance, just fill out a contact form on our website, and I'll find you a local expert that's going to get the answers to your questions. So that's it. I wish everyone just stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you all this Wednesday at 2 o'clock. Take care now.